I define the word discover by it's like somebody wanting to find something that hasn't been known before.
That's kind of a hard word. I feel like when you discover something, you can either love it or hate it, and you want to tell people about it.
Sometimes it's something you're looking for. It's also sometimes you don't expect to happen, but you kind of like stumble upon.
Searching for something of value or like something that you're like curious about.
Find something new? I don't know. I hope I can discover in college how I want to live the rest of my life and what my purpose is going to be here so that I can actually have my life be worth something.
Hey, anybody else happy to just be with people? I'm happy to be with people. I'm an extrovert. How many extroverts in the room? Where are you at? Where are the extroverts at? You got any extroverts up there? Yep. Where are the introverts up? Probably up there, right? Hiding from the people. Hey, on behalf of all the extroverts, we thank you introverts for coming out. We need you, okay? I need these Tuesdays. I'm just thankful to be able to be with people on these Tuesdays. Glad you all came out. My name is Jordan Edwards, if I haven't met you yet, and we are continuing our series. I'm excited that people are here, but I'm also excited that we get to continue this Discover series. Last week, 2 weeks ago, Blake talked about how God, he wanted to know us. God is ultimate. He is perfect, but he wanted to have a relationship with us. Last week, Tommy told us this, that connection that God wanted to have with us, it was broken because of our sin. And that brings us to our topic tonight, discovering Jesus. Now, this is a good news week, okay? So we got that to look forward to. But I also say this. It is a good news week, but we also are talking about one of the most controversial people to ever exist on the entire planet. What I mean by controversial is there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of disagreements. There's a lot said about this guy that we're talking about tonight. So it's going to be a fun night. Good news, controversial. You put both those together, it's going to be a good night. Now, I know this is to be true. We're all human in here, right? At least I hope we're all human. We're all human. That means we've all got preferences. We've all got preferences. And a lot of times we think that our preferences, if we're all honest, we think that our preferences are the right preferences, right? It's the right way. For instance, Tommy threw this up last week. I'm going to throw it up again. iPhone versus Samsung, okay? So what's your preference? iPhone, Samsung, which one is the way to go? My brother actually put it on my radar that there's another one that people aren't talking about, but they should be, the Google. What is this thing called? Google Pixel, right? The 5's coming out, trying to match the iPhone 12. But maybe some of you guys are like me. You guys just like the old flip phone. I kind of wish we'd go back to this, just to be honest. That would be my preference. What about this? Snapchat versus text messaging. Which way is the way to go? You guys tell me. Which way is the way to go? Oh, I'm getting overwhelming amounts of text right now. Hey, I think some people might say that text messaging is the kind of lost its touch. It's more like email. But I think there's some chivalry in it still, and I think it's a good way to communicate. Snapchat is good as well. How about this, Nike versus Adidas? Wow. I think if Jesus were alive and we're walking this planet, he'd be wearing a pair of Nikes or New Balances. New Balance, in my opinion, are neutral. But I don't know. I think I kind of like both of them. They both look good. What about Lululemon versus off-brand Lululemon? Yeah. Exact same thing, about $150 cheaper, right? What about Chipotle versus Qdoba? Personally, I don't have a strong preference here. I will say Qdoba, they have these little chip things that you can put in. It kind of is an X factor for me, in my opinion. The old age, Coke versus Pepsi. But now in this new age, I feel like everybody's more health conscious. And it's more like LaCroix versus bubbly. But don't forget AHA, right? Have you guys tried that? It's good stuff. Some of them actually have caffeine in it. Or my personal favorite, go to Dillon's, find the Kroger off-brand version. You get it for a lot cheaper. Seltzer. It's blackberry citrus. Go try it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. What about this one? How often do you wash your hair? Do you do it once a week, every other day, once a month? I met a girl, I know a girl actually, she might or might not be in this room, who went 28 days. And I don't know if that's my preference, but I will say that is impressive, very, very impressive. We've all got our preferences, right? A lot of times we think our preferences are the right preferences. We're talking about tonight a guy who changed the world, who changed all of history, and a lot up to this point has been revolving around this man that we're talking about. And he said a very controversial phrase. So it was already a controversial man that said a very controversial phrase that if we see it and unpack it correctly, should change our view on everything. Here's a verse. John 14:6 says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, when you read a verse like this, you have to take time. It's weighty, right? You have to take time to think about who actually said it, because who said it actually matters here. Brings us to our topic tonight, discovering Jesus. Now, why is this phrase controversial? So he says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through the Son. Now, initially, you might be like, okay, that's just a phrase that Jesus said. It has no impact on my life. It doesn't affect me today here in this room. Some of y'all might be like, yes, that verse is so true. I found that to be true in my life. It's changed my life. But here for just a second, let's just look and break down what he's saying. He's saying, I am the way. So what is he saying? He's saying, I'm not just a way of living. He says, my example, the way I live, the way I conduct myself, that is the only way to live. Capital T, capital H, capital E. There is no other way. Any forms of living or how to conduct yourself outside of the way that Jesus says, it's wrong. That's what he says. See what I mean? A little controversial. I believe, my way of buying toothpaste is the right way to buy toothpaste. I buy it in the bottle instead of in the tube. I'm just saying, if you buy it in the bottle instead of the tube, you're going to spend a lot less time trying to get toothpaste out of that tube. That's my way of doing it. I think it's the right way of doing it. We've all got our right ways of doing it, but Jesus is saying this: there's no other way to live than his way. Controversial. What about this one? He says, the truth. I am the truth. He's claiming everything he's ever said. Everything he says in the Bible, he says it's absolutely true, without fault, and anybody who ever objects to it, anybody who objects to it, anybody who ever, in any type of a hint of a way, says that it's wrong, they're wrong. That's what Jesus is saying here. That means, if that's the truth, if Jesus is claiming absolute truth, that must mean he's a Chiefs fan, right? He's the best team all around. He's got to be a Chiefs fan, right? She agreed with that. Now, putting that aside, in all reality, if you look at what he's saying, every word that comes out of the mouth of Jesus, he's saying is right. He's claiming absolute truth. That's kind of crazy to think about. Let's look at the next one. He's saying the life. What does he mean by the life? He's meaning security. He's meaning purpose. Where you run to find satisfaction. Where you run to find pleasure. Wherever you're running to find those things, if they're outside of Jesus, he's saying you won't find it. Maybe the most controversial, in my opinion, of all of this, access to God forever. He says nobody comes to the Father except through me, through the Son. Now, I know that's a lot. Initially, out of the gate, you look at Jesus, we're trying to discover who this guy is. And we start off with this phrase. And I remember reading that verse when I was a freshman. And I was second semester, I was sitting in my dorm room. And I had all the lights off, I had my lamp on, I was just looking at the Bible. I had grown up going to church. And for the first time in my entire life, I sat down and I read the Bible. And I was trying to figure out who Jesus was. And when I read this verse, And I actually broke it down. I was like, who is this guy? This guy's claiming a lot right now. You know, I don't share this to like make anybody mad, but I do want to, for a second tonight, wherever you're at, whatever you believe, just cause us to stop for a minute and contemplate what Jesus is saying here. Contemplate who this man is. If you already believe in Jesus, if you're following him, if you have a relationship with him, the goal tonight is that you just see Jesus in an even clearer way, and he'd be lifted up in your eyes because he deserves that. But if you aren't following Jesus and you don't know who he is, you don't have a relationship with him, maybe you're skeptical about that, it's okay. But my hope is that tonight you will see and you will discover who Jesus is, because I believe if you really take time to discover who Jesus is, you will move from skepticism to trust. That's my hope tonight, is that all of us will be able to see that. I'm convinced that if you really discover who Jesus is, your life will be changed. And here are the different ways it will be changed. We got 4 different lines up there at the top, and I want you guys to fill this in. This is based off of what he said: the way, the truth, the life, and access to the Father. At the top there, go ahead and fill this in. If you discover Jesus truly, I really believe that will change the way you live. It will change what you believe. It will change how you will find life. And it will change your access to God forever. And I got a couple of reasons tonight why we can trust God, because that's the question, right? That's what we're all thinking. Well, why in the world should we trust this? Why in the world should we believe this? That's a great question. Let's go ahead and answer that. We've got 3 reasons tonight. And the first one is this: Jesus paved the way. Jesus paved the way. So what did he pave the way to? He paved the way back to God. Blake said this 2 weeks ago. God wants to be in a relationship. Tommy said it last week. That connection was lost. And Jesus and God were not okay with that. And so what did they do? They said, let's make a plan. Let's win them back. I want to pave a way. So Jesus paved the way for every single one of us to have a relationship with God once again. And guess what? He was the only one equipped to do it. He was the only one that was able to do it. If you guys have ever been down to Gulf Shores, some of you guys have seen this bridge before. It's Foley Beach Expressway, right? Now, where we live, there's a project called Kaleo down there that a lot of students go to. It's awesome. But where we live down there, there's basically 2 access points to get to the beach. You either go all the way down to 59, which takes some time, and honestly, it lets you out into, in my opinion, some second-rate, third-rate, fourth-rate beaches. They're awesome beaches, but not in comparison to, in my opinion, the Orange Beach side of things. And the way you get to the Orange Beach side of things, you got to take this Foley Beach Expressway. Now, it's a genius businessman set this thing right in the middle of nowhere. There's not another crossing way for miles within this area. And so if you're going to go to the beach from where we were living, you're going to take Foley Beach Expressway, unless it was the 4th of July. It's backed up. But even if it's backed up, you're still choosing to go most of the time over Foley Beach Expressway. Now, in this scenario, there are many options to be able to get to the beach. You either have to go down to 59, you can go through Foley Beach Expressway. For us, that was the most easily accessed area. But what God is saying is not that. He's not saying, hey, your access to God, me paving a way back to God for you guys. There's not many options to get there. There's one option. You see, God is on one side of that bridge. We are on the other side of that bridge. And it is the only bridge to get back to God, and that bridge is Jesus. It says there's only one. Now, I know you guys are probably hearing that, some of you guys. And you're asking the question, well, okay, that seems like a lot to handle, right? That seems like a lot to take in. Well, in all reality, that is, right? You might be asking the question, well, what about, other people who've never heard of this? What about those who don't know your way, Jesus? What about other religions? How do you deal with that? What you've got to consider, though, in any statement that is made is the one who is saying it. We've mentioned that already. And let's look at who Jesus is real quick. Now, I want you guys to fill this out. Person and purpose. So underneath, pave the way, there's 2 lines. Go ahead and put this, the person and the purpose of Jesus. So we want to look at who Jesus actually is, what qualifies him to be able to pave the way back to God for us. We'll write this underneath that. This is what qualifies him. He's fully God, he's fully man, and he's sinless. Fully God, fully man, and he's sinless. Check this out. Matthew 1:21. Very beginning of the first gospel, it says that she will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So in this verse, we see, all right, there's a baby that's going to be born, and this baby is supposedly supposed to be the God of the universe, okay? And then in the next verse, next chapter, next verse, it says this, after Jesus was born. All right, simple verse. What do we gather from this? Well, we gather this. Jesus was a real person, fully man, right? Now, some might argue against that. They're like, okay, well, in history, I don't even believe that Jesus was actually born. I will tell you this, that if that is your belief, that you are standing kind of on the outside looking in, every major historian that is accredited, that we would believe in, that we would trust in, would acknowledge that Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem around the year that he was born. So if you don't believe that, you're on the outside looking in. Now, I do respect it, but I will say this. As we look at this verse and as we look at historians, what we will notice is that there was a man born in Bethlehem whose name is Jesus. And as we look at these verses, it claims that this man, this baby that was born, is God himself. So we see fully man, but now let's check out the fully God side of it. Colossians 1:15 through 17. This is Paul's perspective on it. He says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, for by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So this is Jesus' resume. He's fully God. He's fully man. Can you guys imagine being there? Just accidentally, somehow you got to show up on the scene of Jesus' birth. You're sitting there and you're watching it happen. Jesus is born, and then all of a sudden God tells you, hey, just to let you know that this is the God of the universe. This guy, this baby right here, yeah, he's the one who created all of this. And how about this? He's the one that's actually holding all of it together. He holds all of this together. And I look at that baby. Jesus probably starts crying, just like babies do. And he asks the question, wait, what just happened? Yeah, it's a miracle. It's crazy. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? But it happened. But not only that, there's something crazier that happened as well. God, fully man, but then the sinless part of it as well. 1 Peter 2:21 through 22. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. So Jesus never sinned, not one time. No lust, no anger, no bitterness, none of that ever. No anxiety. And I, honestly, if I'm going to be real with myself, I was doing okay until this last K-State game. On Saturday. I was doing all right until that game, and some anger, some bitterness, some rage kind of came out a little bit. We stop and think about how amazing that actually is. It makes sense that he is the only one qualified to do what he did. But now, let's look at the second thing that helps us to see who he is, and it makes sense why he paved the path. He's the only one qualified, but he's also the only one equipped. So why would he do it? What's his purpose in all of this? His purpose is this, Luke 19:10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. The Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. There's a rescue mission. That's what this was. God saw that man was apart from him, that we did not have a relationship with him. And because of that, he was not going to settle. So he got off his throne. He became a human being. He had organs. He grew up. He had to learn to speak. Then he served, and then he loved. And then he was on a mission the entire way. It was a rescue mission to get us back to God. And I'm willing to bet some of you guys have heard about this, but a couple of years ago, some of you might remember this, but 13, 16-year-old boys, they decided that they were going to go on an adventure as one of their birthdays. And so they decided, hey, let's go into this cave. The cave is actually called, this is a kind of a funny name. It's called Nan Nang Nan. And in the English, it means this, if you guys are interested. The great cave and water source of the Sleeping Lady Mountain. I don't know if they had a hard time coming up with names, but let's just give them credit for it. I think they could probably come up with a better name. But anyways, they travel into this mountain, right? And it was all fun and games. They traveled into this mountain multiple times. They had gone in, they had gone out, they had gone in, they had gone out. But this time, as they went in, it was the beginning of monsoon season. In the beginning of monsoon season over in Eastern Asia, what that means is it's raining like nobody's business. And so it's the beginning of monsoon season. They walk into the cave, and as they walk into the cave, water comes in behind them, and it pushes them further and further and further into the cave. By the time they realized that they're about 2.5 miles into this cave, and the water was backing them up. There was no outlet. There was no way for them to get out of this cave. And so a day goes by, a couple of days go by, parents start getting worried, national attention starts being drawn in. They try anything and everything to try to get these kids out. They knew that they were there because there were bikes around the path right next to the entrance. And so they bring all of these different people in to try to figure it out. They try to pump water. They had people trying to drill cracks in the side of the mountain. They had divers try to go in, but the Navy in Thailand wasn't equipped enough to do it. Seemed hopeless. Until some international divers who had experience, who had the tools, who had the equipment, who had the training, showed up on the scene. Most of them were people who were across the country, across the nation, across the world, who were going there to serve. They did it out of the kindness of their heart. They're drawn to the story. Anyways, they show up on scene. Here's the entrance of the cave there. There's some pictures. Some of the different avenues that they were trying to crawl through were so small that they'd have to take their tanks off. They'd have to take even some of their rescue mission or their rescue equipment off. And then these two dudes showed up on the scene. So these guys show up on the scene, and they start swimming in, and for hours, even for days, they were traveling through murky, small, little tunnels throughout the cave trying to find these 16-year-old boys. Every time they'd come to an air pocket, they'd put their head up, they'd yell, they'd breathe for a little bit, they would yell to see if they could get any response from anybody, to see if anybody's there. They said they would travel for a bit, they found an air pocket, they came up, and the first thing they did was smell the kids. Now you can imagine 16-year-old kids, kind of like a small locker room without a shower. They didn't have any Axe bottle spray to spray themselves down. It probably stunk. But they found them. They found them. They ended up swimming out of the cave, drawing up a plan, getting a crew together, going back in, and every single one of them was saved. It's a real-life rescue mission story, and we love it. We love to see it. We love to hear about it. It's encouraging. But the parallel to what Jesus did for us is very, very similar. The story of what Jesus did for all of humankind is exactly like this. We have chosen, in a sense, we have chosen to kind of dig our own caves. God said, hey, here's a cave that you can live in. It's safe. You can find pleasure here. You can find satisfaction here. You can find life the way it was supposed to be right here in this cave. And we said, hey, God, I think I can dig my own cave. I can find my own way. And so we start doing that. And all of a sudden, we're digging our own cave. We're digging. Sin is piling up behind us. We're digging. And then all of a sudden, we turn around and the water is at our feet. We're looking at it.
Like some cash.
Starting to realize pretty quickly the sin that we're committing is permanent. Now, these boys had no other option. They had to sit there. They had to wait. The only way they were going to be saved, the only way that they were going to get out of this cave is if somebody outside of themselves,
I have a question.
Tools, with the equipment, with the ability, and with the training.
Hey, Jordan.
To come and to get him, to rescue him. In the same way, Jesus is the only one equipped. He's the only one qualified. He's fully God, fully man, fully sinless. He came in. He did what none of us could do. And he's offering us an opportunity to get back to safety. But like the kids, we all kind of have a choice. When the divers showed up on the scene, they reached out their hands to help them. They made makeshift body bags to be able to get them through the actual tunnel. They could either get into it, they could either trust them, or they could say, hey, I've got this. I'm going to kind of try to build a fire here and make it on my own.
Oh, fine.
Jesus is showing every single one of us that he's showing up to every one of our sinful caves that we've created, that we've dug. He's reaching out his hand. He's saying, hey, I can take you back to safety. I can take you back to God. Now we've got a choice to make, and that choice to make is, hey, whether or not we're going to get into that safety net. We're going to get into that boat. We're going to trust Jesus for who he says he is. And the reason why I bring that up is because if we don't, the harsh reality is this: there's nobody else equipped to do it. There's nobody else willing to do it, but Jesus is.
Game.
Jesus not only is, but he's the only one able, and the only one equipped, and the only one qualified to do it. I believe, like I was saying earlier, if we trust, if we discover who Jesus is, we will move from skepticism and from doubt to trusting him even more for those four things that we just talked about. But one thing we got to realize is this rescue mission that Jesus has been on, they all got out alive. Jesus knew something was going to be true if he decided to take on this mission. It is this: we should trust him because he paved the way, but also because he paid the price. He paved the way, but he also paid the price. Jesus paid the ultimate price to get you back. Now, I say ultimate, and it's like, what does that even mean? We've all paid for something, right? We've all paid for something. I paid money for some things that I probably shouldn't have, like a motorcycle. You know, we've all paid for something. I want you guys to talk just for real quick, 30 seconds. What is the thing that you paid the greatest price for, and was it worth it? What is the greatest price you paid for something, and was it worth it? Go ahead and share real quick, and I'll bring us back together. I'm sure there was some good stuff out there. Mine, I kind of gave it to you already. Mine was a motorcycle. All right, I paid for this thing. I really wanted it. I paid double the price, what I probably should have paid for it. And then I wrecked it, and then I had to pay for double the price of it again to get it fixed. And then I wrecked it again, and I sold it after that. I thought, hey, man, maybe it's time for me to be done with motorcycles. I got rid of it, but we've all paid for something before. What does it mean that Jesus paid the ultimate price? We can see this in 1 Peter 2, 22, or 23 and 24. It's continuation of the verse we were reading earlier. It says this: when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on a tree so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. What's crazy is, to go back to the illustration here, is when he entered back into that cave for you, for us, he knew that the rescue mission wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be free. It was going to cost him something. It was going to cost his life. He knew that coming into it. This is the thing, we've talked about this, the sin that we've had, it had to be dealt with. And when God sent Jesus down, he paved a way for us. He wasn't shoving our sin underneath a rug. He still hated sin. And because he hated sin, he knew that it had to be done away with, because God could not associate with it. And so in order to associate with us again, he had to make people perfect. He loved them so much, he had to make people perfect. But how in the world is he going to make people perfect when they're already disdained? Here's the answer. 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. God chose it to be. This was his plan. He looked at Jesus and he said, hey, I'm going to need you to go do something for me, and it's to get my people back. You're the only one who can do it. Will you do it? Jesus looks at God, loves God. Jesus looks at people, loves people. He says, yes, let's do it. He walks straight into it. God of the universe gets off of his throne. He came to us. He served us. He loved us. And then he gave himself. He was completely misunderstood by most. And then they killed him. You guys ever think about, like, I don't know, I think about this all the time, about the people who are actually killing Jesus, the ones who are actually putting the nails into his hands, the ones who were actually putting him onto the tree. I read accounts like that, and I'm like, do you know who you're putting up there? Do you know what you're doing? It's the God of the universe, but the crazy thing is this. God loved those people as well. We saw in Colossians, he holds all things together, which means this, that as those nails were going to his hands, he was sustaining the hand with the hammer in it that was nailing his hand into the tree. He knew it's what had to be done for the sin to be paid for him. And he didn't just die anyway. A lot of us know this, maybe some don't. But I want to go back to it because I don't think we can ever go back to it enough. Mark 15:24, he lived a life. He did a lot of things while he was here for 33 years, but then they crucified him. Now, if you know anything about crucifixion is one of the worst ways, one of the most humilifying, the most degrading ways to kill somebody. There's no torture that was worse than it before, no torture worse than it after. It was known as the pinnacle in all of history, the pinnacle of the worst ways to kill somebody. The ironic thing to me is that the God of the universe, he knew he was going to have to do this. Why didn't you choose an easier time to do it when, you can just go get a lethal injection? No, he chose it during this time for a reason. It's at the pinnacle of the worst type of humiliation. And I think he did it because of this. I think he did it to show us how much he hates sin. He really does, because of what it does. We don't even realize the nature of it and what it does to us. It leads to death is what it leads to. But then he, on the other end of things, wanted to show how much he loves us. We see the perfect character of God on the cross. We see that he is merciful at the same time as being just. We see that he hates sin at the same time as loving us. We see it met perfectly as Jesus hangs on the cross. He walked willingly right straight into it. I want to share with you real quick what he walked straight into. And I don't want to get graphic, but I think it needs to be shared to shed light, to help us see how much God hates sin and how much he loves us. When he got convicted, he got sent to prison falsely. He had no sin in him. He wasn't guilty, but they did it anyways. A part of what he did, he spent the night in prison. And as he spent the night in prison, the guards mocked him. They messed with him. That morning he gets up. Before he takes the cross to the place in which he's going to be crucified, they ordered to scourge him. And it's a Roman tradition. Basically, when you get scourged, you get tied to a pillar. And as you get tied to this pillar, there are two guards that are going to be behind you, and they've both got whips. And on these whips, there's sharp pieces on the end of these whips that as they would lash them, they were designed to dig into the skin. And so he got these lashes 39 times, almost to the point of death. They got him right next to death. It would hit him over and over again. Every single time it would happen, it would dig into the back, pick up skin, throw it off, pick up skin, throw it off. So he was open wounds. Now, at this point, you would think he'd be done, right? Well, they gave him a beam to carry. It's a 100-pound beam. He's going to carry it across his shoulders. He was going to carry it to the place in which they're going to crucify him. And keep in mind, this entire time, he is not guilty. And he knows it. Where's the motivation coming from? Why are you doing this? I think he had you guys in mind. I think he had us in mind. I think he had God in mind. He picks up the cross. He starts walking. As he's heading there, he falls down 3 times. And if you think about it, you got a cross beam on you. It's 100 pounds. What's catching your fall when you're falling? Nothing. 3 different times he falls. He gets to the point where he needs some help. They get him some help to get to the place where they're going to crucify him. They get to Golgotha, the place they're going to crucify him. And when they get there, that's when the nails come in. 5 to 7 inch nails. These things were thick. Put them right into his wrist, both sides. Spread his arms across, nailed him in. Once they nailed him in, they lifted him up. Once they lifted him up, they tied his feet together, did the same thing with his feet. Nails 5 to 7 inches straight through his feet. Many say that when you're in this position, most people die of either losing too much blood or they lose oxygen, they suffocate. So if you imagine that the only way for Jesus to actually breathe, he's open wounds, his back's open, his back is straight to the tree, and the only way you can breathe really is to pull yourself up. You pull yourself up, let yourself back down. So over and over and over again, as Jesus is breathing his last breaths, his back, his bare back is going up and down on that beam, on that tree. Then finally, Jesus died. He gave his life away. He gave himself up. But on top of all this, to me, what happened physically to him is minute. It is small compared to what happens next. The Father who loved him, who was with him the entire time, who sent him on the mission in order to actually pay the price for this sin, he had to turn his face away. So now, the person that Jesus was closest to, the one he loved, had to turn his face away and then experience the full wrath of that sin. He paid it. I have no idea what that's like. I have no idea what that felt like. It's probably unimaginable. But he took it. He willingly took it. And the question is, why did he do it? And I think he did it for you. I think he did it for us. We see an extraordinary act of love here. And I read accounts like this, like I was saying earlier, and I'm asking the question, do you guys know what you're doing? Do you know who you're doing it to? You're doing this to God. You're putting God on a tree. And every time I come to that thought, God usually stops me. He usually stops me and says, Jordan, that's true. They are putting me on this tree, but it was your sin that put me there. It was you. You were nailing me to the cross. And the reason why he can say something like that is because if you think about it, the nails, do we think the nails, humans, had the strength to stop God from just getting off that cross? There's no way nails actually held him on the cross. You know what held him on the cross? It was this. It was love. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. There's not a nail strong enough, there's not a man strong enough to hold back God, but there is a love strong enough to hold him. That was his love for you. That was his love for us. It's a miracle that he would do something like that. Why would he do something like that for us? And that's a question I want to ask every single one of us in here. I ask myself that question. Who's ever loved you like that? Who's ever loved me like that? Nobody. Who's willing to love me like that? No one. I'm not standing up here on my behalf. I'm standing up here on behalf of Jesus and saying that there is nobody who can ever love you like that. It's only him. He paved the way. He paid the price. Third reason why we should trust him is this. It didn't stop there. He proved it. What did he prove? Jesus is the only man in history to ever defeat death. He's the only one to ever rise from the dead. It's kind of a crazy statement. You know, I always tell people that if there's a man who has lived and he has died and he is raised from the dead and he's got something to tell you, you should probably listen to him, right? He's probably got some answers if that is the truth. I was at Chronic Taco in, I think it was Orange Beach. Yes, Chronic Taco in Orange Beach. Delicious place, by the way. I think it might be better than Chipotle and Qdoba combined. I don't know. I was at Chronic Taco, and there was about 5 frat dudes there. And somehow, some way, I got into this conversation about faith with them. All of a sudden, we were like having this conversation. It was kind of uncomfortable, kind of uneasy. But you know that moment when you can tell you're starting to lose them? You're like, okay, dude, they're not about this. They're walking away. You're like, that's playing in my head as I'm like trying to share stuff with them. And I'm losing them. And then I don't know why in the world I said this, but as they were walking away, I said, you know, if there's a man who's died and come back to life, I listened to him. They stopped. They paused. Hey, it worked. They paused. They turned around, and I was like, what in the world did I just say? I can't believe I just said that. But it worked. Okay, say something. And so they turned around, and as they turned around, I said, this is the only thing I could think to say is, I think you would like what he has to say. They paused. They looked at me for a little bit longer. There was this dude that like was on the far left, kind of looked like a surfer guy, had longer hair, the billboard shorts and stuff like that. And they were all quiet for a while, and he was kind of like shaking his head the whole time, like, oh. He was like, oh, right on. And then he literally turned around and walked away. I've never seen him since. That moment, I'm just saying, if you ever want to stop somebody for any reason, just yell at it. Just give it a shot. I wouldn't condone it or recommend it, but give it a shot. But the reality is this, it did happen. It should cause us to stop for a minute. It should cause us to ponder. The question is, did it actually really happen? That's the one that we're all contemplating, all thinking about, right? Did this actually happen? What's the verdict? What do you think? Some might say, hey, I need evidence. Some might say, there's not enough evidence to prove it. Some might say, that's way too crazy to even talk about. Let's not even talk about that. Matthew 28:6, this is crazy. All right? So in all 4 accounts of Jesus' biographies in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are all 4 of these accounts. There is a picture, a story of Jesus' resurrection, okay? And so in all 4 of these accounts, there's 2 girls named Mary. They were with Jesus the entire time. They show up on a scene. It's the graveside of Jesus. He had just passed away. The stone is rolled away. They walk in, and as they walk in, there's nobody there. The body's gone. And all of a sudden, a dude is just chilling there. Said an angel was chilling there, bright as can be, and all of a sudden the girls freak out. I'd freak out too if I saw that. But as chill as can be, you know, I look at this verse, maybe some people might think this is a formal way. He said, he's not here. He is risen just as he said. I see it as like, man, he's just chilling there, and he is like, what do you expect? He's not here. He is risen just as he said. Luke 24:7, he predicts it. The Son of Man, Jesus says it's the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again. He predicted it. The angel was like, what did you expect? He said he was going to do it, and now he's done it. Me, I look at that, and I'm like, man, this is crazy. And I understand it. I understand that there's some skepticism when it comes to whether or not Jesus rose from the dead, but let me tell you this, you're not in bad company. Both Mark, John, historians would all say that Jesus' brothers, his physical brothers, that every single one of them before the cross or right before the cross were skeptics. They weren't believers. They didn't believe in him. Can you imagine that, like growing up with him? I can't. I've got a brother, a twin brother, so I grew up with him my entire life. We're the same age. That's what twins are. They're the same age. They're born at the same time. We grew up together. And imagine I'm watching him his entire life, and Jesus told people that he was God about age 30. I'm sure people were starting to figure it out because he was doing miracles and he was perfect, never sinned.
It's fine.
But just imagine on our 30th birthday, Jeremy comes to me and he's like, hey, I'm God. I look at him like, no, you're not. You're not God.
7:30, 7:15, 7:30.
I think that's what James probably did a little bit.
Did you put your phone up?
But I want to look at his life because I think it helps us to see something about the resurrection. Let's look at James's life real quick. So James, skeptic, Acts and in Galatians, guess what he's found doing? Acts and Galatians in the Bible, he is found leading the church. So what happened? James is a skeptic all the way up to his brother's death. He watched him grow up. He watched him live. He watched him die on the cross. And then all of a sudden, just for the heck of it, I'm going to be a leader for him. Something missing for me. What's crazy is this. I almost miss this. If you blink, you'll miss it. 1 Corinthians 15, before I get there. 1 Corinthians 15. Paul is talking about what happened to Jesus after he died. So Jesus dies. Paul says that he shows up to 12 people. Shows up to 12 people, says, hey, I'm alive. Here's my mission for you. He shows up to 500 people after that as well. Guess who he shows up to after that? Just one small phrase, one small line. 1 Corinthians 15:7. Then he appeared to James. That changes the game. That changes the game. If I watch my brother go all the way through this, die on the cross, and then he shows up to me, I'll be like, okay, I'm here. I'm in this. What's crazier than that, there's a writer called Josephus. He's a non-believer. He's a historical writer, and he writes about James's death. James, remember, a skeptic. Josephus writes about his death. He's in a synagogue area. People are out there. He's talking about Jesus. The Pharisees who put Jesus on the cross don't like it. So they're going to make a spectacle out of him. They take him to the top of a temple, and they said, hey, what is up with this Jesus thing? This is what Josephus wrote about how he responded. Remember, skeptic. He didn't believe in him. Now he's facing his death. He's on the top of a temple. They're about to push him off. What does he say? He says, why do you ask me about Jesus, the Son of Man? He sits in heaven at the right hand of the great power, and he will soon come on the clouds of heaven. They didn't like that answer. They pushed him off. He landed. He didn't die. He started praying. They threw rocks at him until he died. Now, I'm like, what did I miss? This dude went from skeptic to not being afraid of falling off for Jesus' sake. I'm not trying to make light of it, but there's something there. Jesus showed up to him and he proved it. Jesus died and he showed up to him and he proved it. It's kind of crazy to think about the fact that Jesus actually stamped it. He rose from the dead. And that, my friends, is good news. It is good news. It should cause us to trust him. We like to trust clutch people, right? If I'm developing a basketball team, MJ, right? Mr. Clutch himself. If I'm developing a football team, Tom Brady in his prime, 6 Super Bowls, maybe Patrick Mahomes. You saw I left space there for him. Appreciate that he's being COVID friendly there. If I'm building a house, it's these two, right? You got to have them. You got to have them. We've talked about them, but you've got to have them. If I am trusting somebody with food, I'm going to choose this guy. I don't even know his name, but I've seen him on TV before doing his thing, going around eating food. I want to be like him. I just trust him, right? We trust clutch people. But for how I live, for how we find life, I'm going to trust Jesus. Because he's proved it. You know, this message and this truth have changed a lot of people's lives. And the power of what happened on the cross, honestly, the resurrection should cause people to at least stop and pause and ponder. But to me, some of the greatest testimonies, the reality of the power of it and the paved way, the new lives, are those of people throughout history, and those even in this room. And we've got one that we want to share with you guys tonight. We're going to show it to you through this video, and so I want you guys to check this out.
I went to church probably like one time growing up in my life, and it was in elementary school because a friend invited me. It was something I was always curious about, but no, I didn't even know what they did in church, didn't know what it was about. I knew that the cross meant Christianity, and I remember what Jesus looked like. He had long hair and a beard, and I knew that that kind of went with the term religion, and that was a box I never really touched. I knew it was a part of other people's lives, but I just focused on school, focused on my own life, and really just didn't know anything about it. So I even remember vividly as a child not even knowing God at all, and so the only being in my life that I knew when I was asleep and awake and would give me things was Santa. So even like just praying to Santa for stupid things like winning a board game, something I did, which is crazy to think about now. But and then even coming to college, I knew that I wanted to really focus on academics, and I was very driven to just get involved, improve myself, and be the person I always wanted to be. And so I stockpiled my schedule with so many credit hours, work, volunteer, joined a sorority, and I think trying to prove that I could. I don't know to who, probably to myself. On top of that, while all that was happening, I lived across a hall from a girl named Rachel Lillick, and she invited me to these Bible studies, and I looked at it very like, okay, yeah, I could, get into that, learn something from that, but I viewed it very much as like, I was curious about it, but I had no idea what I had to offer. I just kind of looked at it academically, from an academic standpoint. Like, even when I was attending those, we'd read scripture and I'd be like, yes, interesting, these are really good, like, characters and dates and facts. And I even remember the first time hearing Jesus' story, not having like any idea, any context or anything. I was like, man, those jerks that killed him. I was like, just blown away by that. But and so continued going to those, and I think it was second semester, freshman year, and went to those on and off. And it was specifically in one Bible study. I think I had like been attending church, and my view of God was kind of like, okay, so he like sits on this throne, and like he's all glorious, and he just wants me to worship him all the time. So I just kind of snubbed him away. But at this one Bible study, we were reading scripture, and Rachel just said something along the lines of like, man, God just wants to be your bestie. And that small little phrase like completely turned a light switch on in me. And I realized that I had been such a jerk. Like, who was I to snub this loving and selfless God? And just even looking back at Jesus, and like him no longer just being the guy with like a beard and a long hair, but like, man, that was God's perfect son, and he sent him down and was put to death, and went through all that pain and suffering just so I could be besties with God and have a relationship with him. And this was just such an amazing gift. And I just like had realized I'd been living my life so selfishly, just glorifying myself, trying to prove myself, and just working aimlessly for these things. And when all I had to do was like turn around, and there was God who just loved me, and I was enough to him, and I didn't have to prove myself to him. And that was because he sent Jesus. Like, I was forgiven, and he loved me. So just accepting that free gift and just getting to know God has been the greatest journey in my life, and just feeling loved by him and not having to work for it, but just recognizing how incredibly selfless like God is, and incredibly selfless Jesus is, just blows my mind, and it just warms my heart. And feeling so loved by him. And I would say it's just been incredibly life altering, in the fact that I don't have to, like, in this world you have to work and prove and make it to the top, but in God's world I've already won, and I'm enough.
Give it up for her. That's awesome. That's cool stuff. Never thought of it that way. Besties with God. That's a good one. Hey, I am moved by stories like that. And to be honest, that to me is one of the people ask me, well, how do you believe this? Why do you keep giving your life to this? I'm like, I cannot deny that. Can't deny those stories. And I've seen too many of them to be true. We know that Jesus paid the price, paid the way, and he did prove it. Real quick here, I wanted to end with some practicals. What does this look like? How do we actually live this out? How does this affect us? I'm just going to fly through these really quick, but I'd say this: become fascinated with Jesus. Become fascinated with Jesus. The more time you spend looking at him, the more you're going to be changed, the more you're going to be transformed, the more you're going to trust and see that he is who he says he is. Make a decision. Second one, make a decision. I would say this: if you have not decided to follow Jesus, understand this: following Jesus, it's a journey. There's ups, there's downs, but Jesus is committed to us. But it does take a moment. It does take a decision. It has to start somewhere. And if it hasn't started, I would encourage you, start it. Make that time tonight. Why not? See what he's done for you. He's committed to you. Now you look at the 4 things we listed there at the top, how you live. I'd say this: spend time in your Bible every day, because how you live is how you conduct yourself. And the only way to know how to conduct yourself the way Jesus says is the way is to look at what he says in his word. Spend time in his word every single day. How about what you believe? Test it. I would say test it, what you believe. Allow yourself to be challenged by what Jesus says is true and test it. But I will say this: do not settle with ignorance. Do not settle with being ignorant. Go and discover him for yourself. Discover him more and more if you've already been discovering him. How about how you get life? Where are you drinking from to get life? Ask yourself this question: how are things that I'm running to find life, how is it doing for me? Do an inventory. The things that I'm giving my life to, how are they going? And I'll say this: if you have been growing in your faith already, you're pursuing him already, go deeper. He's inexhaustible. Keep going deeper. He's an inexhaustible well waiting to be explored. You can't reach the limits. Keep going. And then the last one, access to God forever. The point here is to do this: revisit the gospel every day. Preach the story that you heard tonight to yourself every single day. Don't let this become elementary. Let it be the center point of your life, because if you get what we spoke about and we talked about tonight, you'll get it all. But if you don't, then none of it will make sense. If you get what happened, what we talked about tonight, it'll all make sense. Revisit it every single day. Now here for the next few minutes, go ahead and just, for you guys selves, ask that question: what is next? Talk with the people around you. As you guys look at that list, is there anything that stands out? Anything that you want to do? Anything that you want to do moving forward as you're growing in your faith and looking to move forward? So go ahead and talk with each other. The MCs will bring it back up and we'll wrap up from there.